These people are so clearly overpowered, and they have no personality to back it up. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of exploring my questionable past. So one thing that you guys might not know about me is that I'm a writer, and I've been a writer for a really long time. The thing about doing something for a really long time is that you end up creating a lot of stuff, some of which might be good, most of which is not. Let's go back to 2016. So I was just like any other teenager out there. I was reading Harry Potter, Divergent, all those young adult fantasy sci-fi books, and I had the brilliant idea to write a fantasy sci-fi book myself. So at that point I was like 11 or 12, and I had written a couple of stories before, but it wasn't very good, as you could expect, and it was written in like font size like 36 so that I could gaslight myself into thinking that I did something productive by writing 50 pages. When I was 11 or 12, I was like, okay, you know what? I am not a kid anymore. I am a grown adult, and it is time for me to start writing some real serious stuff. I decided to plan my own sci-fi fantasy young adult dystopian book series, and that resulted in the finest literary achievement of the 21st century. In this world, there's like a normal human world, and then there's this planet above the Earth. It's like not a planet in the way that it's 1,000 light years away, but it's a planet in the way that there's a random floating island above Earth, and like nobody on Earth knows that that exists, but for some reason they have the ability to look down on Earth. So it's just like this random layer of the atmosphere that's a civilization, and on this civilization there are people, I guess, like they're humanoid creatures. They're sort of like, they're supposed to be sort of like aliens or like AI. I'd ripped off the abnegation sector from Divergent to make it so that everybody on this planet has to look the same, dress the same. They look up to one singular leader. So my story started with one of the characters from this island learning from the ruler of the planet that there are humans with superpowers on Earth. The people on this planet need to go after them to steal their powers, I guess. In terms of the powers, there are 3 types of superpowers in this world, and they're all related to like traveling. One of the types was someone who can literally teleport, and then the other type was someone who can travel through time, and the other type was someone who can travel through minds. Now that I'm looking back, it's so obvious where all these influences were coming from. You know, the 3 types of superpowers, that sounds a lot like the 3 types of ponies in My Little Pony, where one of them is clearly overpowered. You'll see what I'm talking about later. And also another thing I decided to add in for funsies was that people with superpowers were all very exceptionally strong and fast and smart, which I definitely didn't steal from the vampires in Twilight. So I'm just gonna go into it. I'm going to describe to you all of the madness that happens within these 363 pages. Obviously I can't read the whole thing or else we'll be here all day, and also I care about my mental well-being. So I'm going to summarize some parts for you, and I'm going to read word for word the parts that I find to be exceptionally ridiculous. So let's get started. Okay, so this book was called Web of Minds. Of course I put my own name here. Of course I dedicated it to my sister. Kind of sweet, I think. And then I have a ton of quotes throughout this book. I went through this massive inspirational quotes phase when I was 11. I would cut them out and tape them up everywhere. I still think I have a folder in my Google Drive where I put a bunch of inspirational quotes. So this quote says, "The mind is a powerful force. It can enslave us or empower us. It can plunge us into the depths of misery or take us to the heights of ecstasy. Learn to use the power wisely." It's by this guy that like I literally had no idea who this was. I think I just looked up quotes about the mind and copy pasted whatever came up. He seems to write a lot of books with covers that fit like the Pinterest mom aesthetic, which I was also very into at the time. Okay, so there are 3 parts to this book. Part 1 of 3, defiance, because of course, that's such a cool word. There's another quote here. "Shall I tell you what the real evil is? To cringe at the things that are called evils, to surrender them to our freedom, in defiance of which we ought to face any suffering." By Lucius Annaeus Seneca. Here we go, prologue. "She looked around to see a pair of mechanical wings, broken and stripped to the bones at her feet. She knew she should have fought the tornado. She should have saved the Pegasus when she could have. Now all that was left of her fantastic creation was the metal frame that had once been its bones and the oil that had been its blood." Adillas stood up on her shaky legs, her heart in her throat, her mind racing. All around her were tall, dark trees that loomed over her in the moonlight. She was lost in the death woods with nothing but broken metal pieces and her tired self. Can we talk about death woods for a second? Because that's like a really insane thing to name a forest. Imagine you move into a new town and you're like, oh, what a nice forest. I wonder what it's called. And someone's like, oh yeah, those are the death woods. Girl, I would be out of there. She wished more than ever that her Pegasus hadn't collided with that tree. She'd be flying out of the woods if she knew she hadn't been so careless. So basically, I guess the Pegasus is some automated robot that's shaped like a Pegasus that people ride around. Basically, she's walking around looking for help. There are these monsters in these woods that are deathly deer, which are basically just deer that are deathly because they live in the death woods. And then the italics stop. What kind of trash are you reading today? Liza dropped her books on the mahogany desk and slid into a wooden chair. Siegfried looked up from his book. There were textbooks scattered all across the library desk, the books that he should have been reading. Instead, he'd gotten so sucked into this one fantasy book he'd found in the restricted section. He wondered why it could have possibly been marked as restricted. There was nothing negative about it so far. When I was trying to name the characters in this book, I was looking up how to name characters in sci-fi books. So I found a WikiHow article. We love WikiHow. WikiHow is great. One of the guidelines was, do not name your character something crazy that looks like a keyboard smash. So of course I went ahead and did that. Siegfried is like, oh yeah, I'm reading this book, and then his friend Liza is like, oh, this looks so weird and lame. You're so weird and lame for that. Don't you know that if you sneak into the forbidden section of the library, you're gonna get killed? And then he's like, oh, whatever, I'm already on my 5th warning because he's such a rebel. And then she's like, come on, man, do you really want to get killed? This is serious. And then he's like, oh, you're just such a goody two-shoes. And we already see that he's supposed to be a very rebellious and headstrong character, which would have been great if not for the fact that his personality is very inconsistent throughout the rest of the book. So now these two friends start talking about the elimination, which is an event where the queen of the country, who's the tyrant, chooses one person each year that she's been watching through the cameras that are like everywhere within this country, and choosing somebody who's been exceptionally disobedient and just killing them in front of everybody else. And it's supposed to be like a way to like keep people in line, to show them what happens if you don't follow the rules. And then we also find out that everybody has black eyes and black hair, wears all black clothes. Liza is like, oh my god, you're gonna die, they're gonna kill you. And then Siegfried is like, I know, he wanted to live too, he wasn't suicidal or anything, but sometimes his rebel side got the better of him. Maybe it was time to grow up. He wasn't a kid anymore. But every time he ran into a danger, his first impulse was to try it out. Liza kept talking. I heard from my mom this morning that Queen Rain will be on broadcast today. That's the tyrant, by the way. About 5 minutes from now. We're all supposed to check the broad screens. So the broad screens are supposed to be like these huge TVs that are like everywhere throughout the city, which I think I stole from the Legend trilogy. She flipped through some of the pages and kept writing. Siegfried looked over her shoulder. Even though her writing speed was almost faster than typing, her handwriting was neat and straight like a computer font. She definitely brings like pastel colored highlighters to the classroom and takes notes that look like this. So then he continues reading the book about the girl with the Pegasus and all of that, and then he starts going on this tangent about how he knew this book was only banned because it was written by humans and humans are so stupid. But then we also find out that the people on this planet created humans, so they're basically God. Also, this planet is called Eudoxus. And then so we find out that the broad screens are turning on. Siegfried and Liza are like looking at a live broadcast of the city hall where like a spaceship lands, and then the queen comes out of the spaceship and is like, Queen Rain stood boldly on the platform facing the still air above the nervous, unspeaking crowd. Her long black hair like a curtain stayed still and draped across her back even with the breeze. Her eyes like black stones gazed out into the crowd. The queen took a sharp breath before announcing, People of Eudoxus, your time has come. The crowd murmured, confused, as that was not what she usually said on elimination days. Remember, elimination is when they kill a random person. The queen, mildly annoyed, glared at the crowd sinisterly, which did nothing less than silence the buzz. Siegfried stared at the screen in anticipation, wondering what the heck she could possibly mean. People of Eudoxus, your time has come. On this day, you are here to hear an important message. There is magic on Earth, Rain announced grandly, and the crowd gasped in astonishment and looked around anxiously. Disappointment filled Siegfried. He'd been expecting news that he didn't already know, because of course he's such a rebel and he knows things that people don't. Liza gasped dramatically next to him. Magic on Earth, she whispered loudly. But the thing is that I thought they created humans, so I feel like if they created humans, they also would have given them the powers, right? So like, why are they suddenly trying to take the powers back? You know what I'm saying? And so basically we find out that there are actually 4 people on Earth who have these magical abilities that Queen Rain wants the people of Eudoxus to like bring back so she can steal their powers. We learn that one is Peregrine, which is the term for people who can control minds and travel through them. I think I just Google translated English to Latin, and I think I just looked up like mind traveler, thoughts traveler, and then just like plugged in whatever Latin it gave me. There's another one called a Viagrim, which is basically just someone who can physically travel, teleportation and stuff. And then we find out that there are actually 2 chronograms, which are basically people who can time travel. We later find out that the thing about chronograms is that they have to be in like duos or trios in order for their magic to work. I don't know why, like what purpose that serves other than me trying to like ship two characters, but whatever. You guys will find all that out later. And then we find out that all these people are somehow like in America. Earth is like really big, and for some reason all 4 of the people with superpowers live in America. I really pulled a manifest destiny with this one. So then the queen shows everybody like a map of a specific house where one of the people with powers is living in. So she's like, oh yeah, you can start with this person. We're going to go down and kidnap her, blah blah blah, bring them back. I want to steal their powers. And so everybody's like, yeah, we love kidnapping children. But of course Siegfried is such a rebel. He's like, this is so wrong, which like he's not wrong. While everybody else is cheering for the queen, Siegfried decides to run away. He gets into his little spaceship that's called an Etrina ship, I think. I don't know what these words mean, but we later find out that there is somebody named Etrinity who was the person who founded Eudoxus, so it like was named after them, which is like so confusing because like where did that person even come from? If the people on Eudoxus created humans and this person created the people of Eudoxus, then who created that person? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so much egg and not enough chicken. And he like gets into the spaceship and then he's like running away, and then the guards are coming after him being like, hey, stop. And then they try to like shoot through the windshield to like get him to stop, but then he just like flies away, and then he crash lands onto Earth, and that's where the chapter ends. Chapter 1, that was the prologue, by the way. We haven't even started the freaking book yet. A loud clap of thunder shook the entire house. Wind clashed against the window, the rain falling sideways, and lightning striking a tree barely miles away. Blah 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 blah. So then we get introduced to another character named Nova, and she's like sitting by the window, she's like watching it rain, and she's like, oh no, I'm so lonely because my family left me to go to a party, and I'm just like stuck here alone because they think I'm a creep and a weirdo, so they're just trying to keep me home so I don't go out and embarrass them, which is a crazy thing to do to your child. And then she talks on and on and on about the rain for like multiple pages, and then so she goes into her bedroom, which we find out is literally just a closet. Of course, I stole from Harry Potter. And then we find out that she has been having visions. In these visions, she has been envisioning people with like black hair and black eyes, like soldiers carrying guns. And then so like as she's like sitting and talking about how her life sucks, she hears this huge crashing noise from the roof, and so she's like, uh-oh, I better go check that out. So she's like, oh my god, there's a spaceship on my roof, that's crazy. The Siegfried crawls out of the spaceship and he's like, hey there. And then she's like, who are you? And then so they start conversing about the whole situation with Queen Rain trying to come get her for her powers, but Nova doesn't know she has powers. So Siegfried is like I said, it's a land above the clouds. And then Nova's like, so there's another land? You're some sort of alien? How come you don't have a last name? Why are you on my rooftop? What's that weird looking ship over there? Nova had too many questions and had a feeling she wouldn't be getting any answers. I don't have time to answer all those questions. I'm only here to warn you that my people are coming. Queen Rain is coming for you and all the other wanderers, which is the term for people who have powers, in New York. I need to get you to their fortress. And then Nova's like, hold on, who's coming for me? What fortress? And then so Siegfried is like, oh right, she doesn't know anything. And then so he basically recaps for her, and then she's like, magic isn't real, there's no way. But for some reason he just has to go like, hey look at those spaceships that are flying in the sky that are coming for you. And then she looks up and she sees the spaceships that are flying in the sky and coming for her, and she's like, ruh-roh, there are spaceships flying in the sky that are coming for me. And then that's all it takes for her to like believe him, and she's like, okay, yeah, take me to your fortress, I don't want to get killed by these random spaceships that are flying in the sky. And then so he basically like gets back into the spaceship with her, and then they travel to New York where the other wanderers are presumably at, and that's the end of the first chapter. If you think that's fast-paced, it's actually not, because it's taken us like nearly 50 pages to get to this point because they keep repeating the same thing over and over again. Now they're in New York. Chapter 2. The grass was soft and verdant, with colorful flowers popping up all over the place. The sweet smell of pine and lemon drifted through the air, a gentle gust of wind stirring the scents about. This is very unrealistic for New York, because I've only been to New York a couple of times, and as far as I can recall, it's literally just like rats, people smoking, people pushing other people into the subway track. Little butterflies lazily flitted around pine trees giving sun-flecked shade, and the sky above was a clear blue and cloudless. Are you sure we're in the right place? This doesn't seem like somewhere a Fortress of Magic is located. Nova said Fortress of Magic in a tone stating that she didn't quite believe in it yet. Absolutely, Siegfried replied with an air of arrogance that was unfamiliar to him. Why was he feeling so different? He decided he had no time to ponder that at the moment. Making his decision, he sauntered toward the building. Nova was at his heels a moment later, having to jog to catch up. She found something strange in his demeanor, something like overconfidence or cockiness. Sure, she didn't know Zixford that well, but she did know that people didn't just act like that. There was something weird going on. You can say that again, because I don't know what the frick is going on here either. And then so they wander through the random grass field that happens to be in New York. And then so they find like a random cave, and they're like, oh my gosh, this cave must lead into the fortress. And it's like, how did a random cave get there, and how do other people not notice it? And then so they walk around, they're like wandering through the tunnels of the cave, super confused, and they're like, uh-oh, where the heck are we going? And finally they find the right path. The final tunnel opened up to a large chamber, to a room that was more than just magnificent. It was about a mile long and wide, with blue and gray tinted floor-to-ceiling windowed buildings stretching from one side to the other. The buildings were like office buildings, but a lot larger and with strange devices, launch pads and holograms swirling out of the sides. This, Nova breathed, looks like a city. Eyes were wide open, her lips parted, and her feet were planted on the ground. It looks like more than just a city. Zixford didn't believe what he saw. This must be a dream, he thought, or I'm going crazy. Yeah, probably the second one. So like, what I also don't get is how this thing exists. As far as we know, there are only like a few people with superpowers on Earth. They basically just created a city. None of their powers have anything to do with building. I feel like this is just a plot hole that I never really filled in, and at the time I was aware of it, and I think I did intend on filling it in at some point, but I just like didn't know how. If I were to write this story today, I definitely would have had their fortress be like someone's garage, and then so they're like, hey, is anybody there? And then their voices are echoing just to accentuate how freaking big this place is for no reason. Suddenly we see people entering the room. A second later, two black cloaked figures launched out from opposite sides of the cave, falling and landing on the ground that was a good 2 stories down with perfect grace. The one on Nova's left held a long rope, the other holding a short bladed knife. Moving faster than any other human could, the one with the rope encircled it around Nova's hands and feet, then around Zixford's, keeping a firm hold on the other end of the rope. Who are you? He managed to ask. Even though he had only whispered it, his voice was amplified by the cave until it sounded as if he were shouting. The one with the knife lunged forward, the blade glinting at his throat. Who are you? The figure demanded in a gravelly voice, looming even though they were a good handful of inches shorter than him. Zixford tried to talk, but his voice was gone. His gaze flickered to Nova, who was trying to wrench free. He turned his eyes back to the figure and responded loudly, I am Zixford of Eudoxus, here to deliver some important news about assailants who are searching for you. At this, both figures froze. His attacker lowered the knife, the other letting go of the rope. A bit hesitant, the figure in front of him shook off her hood, returning her knife to a scabbard at her coat. Zixford marveled at the girl in front of him. She had neat, dark brown hair arranged in a clean braid at her shoulder, brown gold almond-shaped eyes, and dark skin. A thin scar curved from below her left eye halfway down to her lips, which were painted dark blue. Jeffree Star who? I think one of my big problems when I was younger as a writer was over-describing my characters. I would always over-describe characters, locations, buildings, random scenery. Wherever I could show off my descriptive skills, I would take that opportunity. All these wanderers have an angel wing charm necklace, and the angel wing charm could shift into a knife in case of emergencies. I actually did have an angel wing necklace at some point because I wanted to be just like the characters in my book. Like, I was my biggest fan. And then so Zixford is like, oh yeah, there are these people trying to come and kill you, and they're like, what the heck? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then so Nova is like, oh my gosh, who are these freaks that just like came out of the walls? Speaking of which, what are you? Nova asked, the question that had been nagging at her mind for quite some time. How did you figure out your abilities on your own? I'm Kai, she's Jasmine, replied the boy tersely. We're time wanderers. Which is pretty much time manipulation, the girl put in. And we didn't figure out our powers on our own. Will did it for us. Right, there's another one of you, Nova said, remembering. Where is he? Jasmine bristled. He's got things to do, like boring plant stuff. Nova nodded, although she wanted a clearer explanation. How did he know? How about you ask all your questions later? Right now, we've got to show you all the cool stuff this place has, Kai said, flashing them a brilliant smile. You are staying, right? Yeah, maybe for a few days. Nova looked at Zixford. He just shrugged. It wasn't like he had anywhere else to go anyway. So that brings us to the end of the second chapter. So yeah, let's just keep going because like it's about to get down. So then Nova like tours the fortress. She goes to the different buildings, and then apparently there's like a movie theater, there's an engineering room, there's a weapons vault, there's an art studio, there are like tons of bedrooms and labs. But we also find out that like all the items in these rooms are old, all the stairs are crumbling, the walkways are like all rusty. And it's like, wasn't it just like one chapter ago where we learned that this city has like floor to ceiling buildings and it's like high tech and has holograms and stuff? And then so we find out that now Nova is going with Jasmine to the weapons vault, a silver-coated room with a fragile glass ceiling. Jasmine had long since shedded her coat and was wearing an oversized black band sweater and black jeans, black combat boots laced up to her knees, the toes, heels, and soles plated with metal, which I also think I stole from the Legend trilogy. Her dagger was gone, but her necklace had the same wicked glint, because it's the angel wing necklace, remember, that can turn into a knife. Definitely the latest trend of 2125. What the heck? Where are we? I'm so lost. Is that why New York is like a flower field? Is it because it's after the apocalypse? Where did you get this? Nova asked, picking up a long katana sword with a hooked end. Cracked white gems were embedded in the blade, glinting as she turned it side to side. Jasmine looked up from the doorway of the weapons vault. She walked over and took the sword in her own hands. This place was built under an old factory that created weapons and imported them internationally. Sometimes we go on things we call missions to scavenge these. She's like, yeah, we go on these things called like missions. You might not know them. They're kind of like obscure and underground. That just adds a bit more to the Wanderer lore, I guess. They like go rummaging around in their little mole tunnels being like, where are my weapons? And then suddenly Jasmine gets a call on her phone. For some reason there's like signal down there. She turns to Nova and she's like, we're going. And then she's like, where are we going? And Jasmine's like, you'll see. Because for some reason everyone in this book has a hard time communicating with each other. Okay, so Nova is like following Jasmine. We found out that Jasmine is taking her to see Will, who is the leader. And then so the two of them go to his office and they knock on the door. And then the door opens and then Nova looks in. And then we find this room also looks incredibly edgy, just like every other thing in this freaking book. Files and papers littered the floor, beeping devices cracked open and sprawled across cross counters lining in the back. The floor was a gray tile, the walls black with streaks of red. Well, clearly interior design isn't their strength. Small windows were carved into one side, dim lights casting shadows across the floor. A black sword, bow, quiver of arrows, and 3 knives were propped up against one wall, all of them shining like obsidian. Everything was out of place, like a hurricane had hit it. In the middle of the room was a black desk, with a boy about her age sitting behind it. They're all like 16, by the way, so they're literal children. Kai and Zixford were standing near him, stiff and alert as if they were guards. So for some reason it's taken Zixford like 5 minutes to like completely accustom to this place and become affiliated with these people, which is like interesting. Like at least with Nova there's a bit of intrigue where she's like, oh my god, what's this? What's that? Jasmine stopped past the mess and approached the table. Will, she's here, Jasmine said, curling her fingers around Nova's sleeve. He stood up and drifted towards her in fluid, graceful movements. You're Nova Ross, he noted, as if criticizing. Apparently he has midnight black hair, he has like bright blue eyes. I was definitely trying to appeal to the masses in the case that I actually published this book. I think this character was definitely inspired by somebody from the Young Elites trilogy. I don't remember who, but it's definitely giving that vibe. He's like, oh yeah, hi Nova. By the way, how did you find out you had powers? And then she's like, I didn't know, just Zixford told me to warn me that their queen is coming to kill me. So Will is like, oh yeah, I already know that. I know all about the Eudoxus business. Apparently Jasmine and Kai didn't know that. Bro was just gatekeeping information from his besties that concerned their lives. He's the one who can teleport. So if Nova's the one who can read minds and Will's the one who can teleport, then that means that Jasmine and Kai are the ones that can travel through time. So Will is like, okay, the rest of you get out. I need to talk to Nova. And then so he's like, oh yeah, use your powers on me. Like I want to see you read my mind. And then Nova's like, okay, I'll try. And then she tries really hard and it doesn't work. And then she tries again. And then she like gets into his mind and then she sees visions of war and people dying. And then she comes back out of his mind and then she's like, girl, what the heck was that? And then Will is like, don't ever look into my thoughts again. And then we also see that there's like a blonde-haired girl dying in his memory who later we find out was this other character that he was affiliated with, which I won't get into yet. And then she's like super dizzy and she's like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that. I used my powers. Now she's like psychoanalyzing Will. He had seemed so basic, so simple, but now she could only think of him as a complete mystery, affected by his past, hiding in the shadows, like some character from a poorly written book. I love how self-aware this book can be at moments. Like sure, most of it is a dumpster fire, but there are moments like this that just show me that even at 12, like I knew this was low-key a hot mess. All she could do was avoid any problems and go silence herself and avoid eye contact. Just a really healthy dynamic for two co-workers to have. The awkwardness stretched across the room and she felt like the source of it. Normally she would run away without saying goodbye, but again, he could kill me. Where had her confidence gone? And then so in chapter 4, Nova is wandering around the building again, and then she finds the rest of the characters in a lounge. Jasmine's like, hey, how'd it go? And then Nova's like, I don't think he likes me. And then she's like, yeah, he doesn't really like anybody. Nova's like, then why do you stick around? Which is a really good freaking question. Jasmine is like, oh, I don't know. He just like provides authority, I guess. And Siegfried is like, yeah, I like that. Girl, didn't you just flee an entire nation because you didn't like that they instilled a sense of authority? They respect Will because he's the one that like brought all of them together and built this fortress. Like, still confused about how do you single-handedly build a fortress when you're like a freaking teenager. It's ridiculous. Nova's like, oh yeah, by the way, I saw his memories, and the rest of them are like, you saw his memories? That's crazy because he never opens up to us about any of his past. And then she's like, yeah, like I saw these visions of this girl dying and I don't know who that is. Jasmine and Kai are like looking at each other and they're like, could it be? Could it be? Nova's like, what the heck are you talking about? But then she doesn't have a chance to elaborate because apparently there are people who have invaded their fortress. So the four of them are running towards the source of the intrusion. Like we basically just see like Eudoxian people wearing masks. And then so they like start fighting, and then we get this like extremely long and winded fighting montage. For some reason Nova somehow knows how to fight even though she's literally never left her Harry Potter-esque closet room before. And then we find out that one of the guards is actually Siegfried's cousin. So he's like, hey, you have to come back with us, and Siegfried is like, nah. And then he's like, darn it. Will just like comes out of nowhere because remember he can teleport, and then he like saves Nova from being killed by one of the guards during the fight. And then she's like, oh my god, no one's ever done that for me before. And it's like, girl, that's not a very high bar because your parents like literally abandoned you. They finally managed to get the guards to leave because they beat them up badly enough, and then they're like, fine, but we'll be back. If I describe this book the way that I've been describing it now, it seems very normal, right? Like it sounds like a normal book. I'm intentionally avoiding lots of random lines that are whack. I'll play them on screen for you right now so you can see the worst lines from this book.
Are you insisting that I'm evil? No, I'm suggesting that you're evil. Jasmine sighed and mumbled, if I were evil, you would be dead by now. Oh wait, you're already dead. Dead inside. Jasmine knit her eyebrows. Don't be a pessimist, she said, mostly teasing. Look who's talking, came a voice from the doorway. Jasmine turned as Kai walked across the room, finding a seat next to her. I am not a pessimist. Okay, whatever you need to tell yourself to make yourself feel better. That explains so much, Kai said. It explains why I can kick your ass, Jasmine corrected. Come on, Jasmine, he said. Be realistic. Girls can't do that. What? Jasmine said, clearly offended. You wanna go? Kai laughed. Please, you must be crazier than usual.
Chapter 5. They know our location. We've got to move. Will murmured in a low voice, sitting next to Nova on a long sofa in the lounge. When he'd found the fortress, he'd been sure that no one would be able to find it. Apparently, he'd been wrong. Yeah, because you literally put like the most obvious looking cave entrance in the middle of a random field in New York, which is one of the most popular states for people to go to. For people who are supposed to be smarter than like humans, like she ain't smart. Just got an email, I gotta check it. Move to where? Unless you've got another fortress somewhere across the globe. We're practically dead meat, Jasmine replied, sprawled across the recliner with her legs hanging off the armrest. I know, there's only one place I can think of right now, but we can't risk the journey, especially with Eudoxus positioned right above the route. He had been pondering this for multiple months, after he'd received a message from a Eudoxian messenger a year back, telling him to show himself or they'd come and kill him themselves. What's your plan? Nova asked. She'd changed into the unofficial Wanderer uniform, a dark blue coat with velvet linings and scabbards, metal-plated boots, and dark blue clothing since the night was never completely black. Oh, that's so deep. Her brown hair dyed into clumps, her imperfect face shone with a strange sheen, but her hazel eyes were as bold as ever. We have to know that she's not like the other girls. She's not pretty, even though she's literally described as pretty like multiple times, but whatever. I know a hidden cave in South Africa. Magic won't be able to teleport us there. It's too far of a distance. A plane is obviously not the best choice, and a ship won't be any better. Our best bet is a submarine if we can find one, Will said, remembering his map in his office. We can sail along the United States, along the Gulf of Mexico, and across the Atlantic, and the entire journey should take about 3 weeks. Only 3 weeks? It's worth it then, Nova commented. Yes, but we suffer from a terrible lack of decent submarines, Will responded. I've got a submarine, Kai said, speaking up from behind a giant map. Jasmine frowned. You have a submarine? How? Those things cost like $1 million. Her frown melted into a shocked expression as she finally realized something. Kai smiled slyly. In case you haven't heard, I have $1 million to spend. My father's a company owner, and I'm free to use all his stuff as long as I don't destroy them. That's why I recognized you. You're the one who was the youngest person ever to win an Emmy, Nova murmured. Your dad was that rich guy on the news who held the world record for most planes owned? Something like that, Kai mumbled. So apparently he's like a famous actor and his dad is rich. I feel like people would notice if like a famous actor just like disappeared off the grid and then appeared like periodically wearing a goofy looking cloak. Siegfried is like, how soon can we reach the submarine? So he's like sitting in front of a computer. Also, like, other than being a rebel, he's also supposed to be like a big like nerd. He's supposed to be the Twilight Sparkle of this universe. And then Kai is like, as soon as it's safe, really, I can drive us to our estate and I have people who'll take the submarine down to the port. Excellent. The last thing we need to do is take all our things, and important things only. The remains should be destroyed as it could be used as evidence. We leave tomorrow at midnight, Will said, confirming their plan. He turned to Nova and said under his breath, and we've got to train you before that. They plan on destroying this fortress, which is like, first of all, it's freaking huge. Like, if you blow the place up, how are you gonna do that without creating like a magnitude 7 earthquake? Any method they use to destroy this place will be like so obvious to everybody, and like the cops will probably find it, mainstream media will probably find it and be like, yo, what the frick? There are weird people down here, and like it'll just be a fiasco. So that night, Nova is getting ready to go to her first training session, which I also definitely didn't steal from Divergent. A lot of books have training scenes, I guess, but I definitely tried to go for a Divergent-esque training scene here. And then so as she goes to the training ring, she overhears Will and Siegfried inside the ring like talking to each other about Nova. She's a danger to us all. Her magic is more powerful than anything I've seen ever. She's the reason Eudoxus found her location, and unless we can find a way to dial down her power, there's no way any of us can stay alive, Siegfried was saying. Who was he talking about? Girl, don't even be a pick-me. Like, we already know that everyone's talking about you. And also, how does he know all of this? Like, wasn't he like so confused about all this like seconds ago? I don't think so. It could have been your microchip. Is it connected to Eudoxus in any way? Will replied in a defensive manner. Are you accusing me of causing the attack? No, all I'm saying is that Nova isn't the source of the problem. I feel something else, like fibers of magic that don't belong to a paragram. It's not in you, Kai, Jazz, or me either. Nova took the short pause following to cough loudly. Will and Siegfried turned around sharply, realizing she'd been standing here for a while now. Will was quick to cover. He drifted over exactly the way a bowling ball wouldn't and slid a dagger between Nova's fingers. And Will is like, this knife is made of iron and silver, or a metal we call lenoxium, a strange blend we discovered a few years ago at the bottom of this very chamber. The symbols on the hilt are words in an ancient language. Phoenician, probably, Will explained before motioning for her to walk 20 meters away from a large target. In case you haven't noticed, our signature weapon is a dagger. Small, sharp, and easy to use, unlike clumsy weapons like swords. Can't you just use a gun though? Like, is this not 2100 whatever? I personally favor these myself, and you may find it convenient as well. Now watch and copy my motions exactly. Will pulled out a dagger from the scabbard on his coat, spun it into the air and caught it again so that the blade faced the target. Not wasting another moment on aim, he flicked the dagger forward and it slammed into the target with a loud thunk. The blade landed on the X in the center of the bull's eye. And then so we find out that he's like not only like extremely attractive and like moves super gracefully, he's like very strong and fast, but he can also like throw knives really freaking well, which is like terrifying. Like if I met this man in real life, I would be running for the hills. Okay, so Nova is like, are you sure you want me to try? I'm gonna embarrass myself. And he's like, girl, just do it. And then she's like, okay, fine. And then she tries throwing the knife and then it lands really far from the target and she's like so embarrassed. And then like Will gets up real close to her and he's like, okay, this is how you do it, and like leans over her to like show her what to do. And then she's like, oh my god, because she's like so down bad for this random manipulative guy that has like nothing special about him. So she like trains until midnight and then she goes back to her bedroom, which we find out is like another interesting interior design choice. The walls and floor were made of steel, dim lights drilled into the ceiling. A black and white carpet stretched across half the room, stopping at an elevated four-poster bed with black and white sheets. Curtains draped elegantly over the frame, shielding the bed completely. A stand for any weapon stood near the bed, underneath the coat rack next to a thick target. A desk with stacks of reference books stood across from it. Two doors, one for a closet and the other for a bathroom, were next to the desk. There was no window, but to make up for it, there was a flat screen television that was currently displaying the time. This is still like her first day at this fortress. All this stuff from like her coming to the fortress to like getting attacked by these random people to like trying her powers for the first time to like training to deciding to take a stupid like submarine to a different part of the world. Like all of this is in the same day. This is like her first time lying down since all that. And then she also finds a book in her room called The Knowledge of Idiots. I never explained what exactly this book is. Apparently there's like a random page that says, connecting the stars one by one to create the constellation of Kronos, the angel of time, the one who was rumored to have created the entire species of chronograms who once thrived in her world. Only after the conquering of a trinity of Eudoxus were they killed off, blah blah blah, and then the page ended abruptly. It looked like the rest of the page had once contained writing, but it had been whitewashed. By whom? Or more importantly, why? Were these things better kept a secret? Nova flipped through the entire chapter, finding nothing in elaboration, but she did know that there had once been more wanderers, until they were killed by a trinity. But who or what was a trinity? Siegfried would know. And then so, after finding out like a tiny bit of information from this random book, Nova just knows that something is up. So she goes out of her room, she like looks for Siegfried, and then she finds him in his office. Like suddenly this man just like has an office out of nowhere. And then she's like, hey, can I talk to you about this book? And then he's like, yeah, like let's talk about this book. And that's the end of chapter 5. And then in chapter 6, they're like exploring the hallways, and then they finally find a room called the Constellation Room, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally just like one of those like planetarium exhibitions where like you can sit in the room and there's like a replicated like night sky overhead. This forest just literally has everything except the kitchen sink because there's no plumbing down there probably. And then so they're like sitting against each other. Siegfried is like, what were you trying to show me? And then Nova was like, oh yeah, like can you tell me about this book? Like what exactly happened? Who is a trinity? And then Siegfried is like, oh yeah, like a trinity was a tyrant. She was not born into any royal family, but she was a noble who overthrew the government. This was way back in the 15th century when there was an abundance of wanderers, especially chronograms. However, Trinity was unhappy with how much power Earth had. She captured many of them, tortured them to reveal the secrets of magic. None of them knew. Siegfried paused. His eyes flitted down to the right, trying to remember something. So Trinity killed off the wanderers? Basically, but she didn't kill all of them. There was one chronogram whose name was unknown, but his or her family was spared because of their alliance with Eudoxus. A shock looked past over Nova's face. Why would a wanderer ally with Eudoxus? Possibly from fear. You know this saying, if you can't beat them, join them. That's what the family did until they rebelled. Is that how Jasmine and Kai are here? Nova leaned closer in deep interest. Her shoulder brushed against Siegfried's, and Nova felt her heart leap into her throat for some unknown reason. This is like her first day on the job, and she's already got 2 mans. This is so like typical YA cliche. We have the one mysterious guy with dark hair who doesn't talk to anybody, and then we have this other like awkward nerdy dude, and of course she's the not pretty girl who's like, oh no, whoever will I choose? And then so their conversation ends with some cheesy dialogue where they're like, we'll survive this time, we won't let them kill us. And Siegfried is like, yeah, bro, you're literally part of the enemy, like you are the problem. We find out that they have a lot of reasons to get along because Siegfried was under the control of his country while Nova was under the control of her family. It's like, whoa, that's like so connected and they're so relatable to each other. I actually think Nova and Siegfried are a better couple than Nova and Will. At least he gives a heck about her life and her well-being, you know, while Will is like, don't ever look into my memories again. So I don't know how much of this video I'll be able to film because I've been filming for an hour and I'm only a third of the way through the book, but I'll just try my best, okay? Please be gentle on me. I've had a rough 18 years. Chapter 7. Jasmine wakes up in her bedroom and then she finds Kai sitting at her desk on the phone. For some random reason, apparently bro can't use his millions and millions of dollars to get himself his own phone for his bedroom. He's like trying to work out the submarine negotiation, and then Jasmine's like, what are you doing in my room? And then he's like, sorry. And he doesn't really give a reason for why he's in her room. Kai is like, yeah, we can just go drop by my place to get the submarine and then we'll be on our way. And then so they're like, okay, but like, isn't that dangerous because the people can't know about our powers? And he's like, yeah, but we just have to not show them our powers, and the rest of them just don't see any problem with that. So Will is like, okay, so our goal after we get the submarine is to sail to the fortress and hide from the Eudoxians, which like sounds reasonable if you ignore the fact that why is there a fortress in a random place when the only wanderers that remain are in America? That does not make sense. Anyway, suddenly like Jasmine gets like so mad and she's like, you want us to run from them? She's pissed that they're just like running away from the Eudoxians instead of fighting them. Where did this attitude just come out of? Wasn't she totally on board with the whole like running away from them thing? Like why is she complaining about it now? So like she has this whole fight with Will, and then he's like, God, you're so annoying. And then she's like, yeah, and you're like a bad leader, blah blah blah. And then they all leave disturbed, and it's like this whole conversation could have been so avoidable. Of course, I was just an edgelord and I had to have them argue no matter what. So chapter 8 is really short. After the whole argument, Jasmine is talking with Kai, and then she's like, oh my god, Will is so annoying. And then he's like, yeah, you're annoying too. And then she's like, no, you're annoying. And then they're like, oh my god. And that's the end of the chapter. Okay, chapter 9. Nova is training again, and then she's gotten a little bit better, but she still sucks. And then Will is like, no offense, but what's wrong with you? And then she's like, I don't know. If I freeze up like that in a real attack, they're gonna kill me in 10 seconds flat. Try 5. Thanks for the confidence booster. Will sighed. It takes a couple decades for people to master all the weapons. You don't have to be perfect. Nova almost laughed. Easy for you to say. What are you, a military genius? Yes, that's exactly what I am. The hint of sarcasm was still not there. But what I'm trying to teach you is to remember all these skills during a real battle. If you get all nervous and forget all this, there's really no point in training. Preach, dude. But also, like, I just don't like him. I feel like he'd be really into alpha male content. He's like, yeah, the main purpose of training is so that we can learn to face our fears. And then Nova's like, face your fears, just like what you're doing by hiding from Eudoxus. And he's like, how dare you say that to me? And then she's like, ruh-roh, I've done an oopsie. And then she runs away. Where is this attitude suddenly coming from? Why do all these people suddenly not want to run away? Like, is that not like the whole plot of the book? Like, I'm so freaking confused. And so she basically runs away, and then she thinks about how he's so weird, but how she also is like infatuated with him for like no freaking reason other than the fact that he just looks like a Walmart Edward Cullen. And then so she like, you know, walks around to clear her mind, and then of course she stumbles back to Will's office because she has like some weird attachment issue, which I don't blame her for. Her parents literally abandoned her. She asked him about her powers, what are the limits to it, what can she do. There's not much that we actually find out about the limits of her power or the magic system. The conversation just quickly switches to this whole thing about what happened to all of the other wanderers, and then we find out that they actually died through a disease, and it's getting real depressive. And of course I can't write a single chapter without having some like cheesy quote, so suddenly the mood of the conversation shifts, and then Nova's like, it's stupid of me to come in and ask about the past. We can't worry about that anymore. We need to go forward, right out the future. Suddenly Will is like, okay, you know what? I think you're right. I think we should low-key fight against them while still running away. Like, we can find like a good middle ground. And then she's like, that's what I'm talking about. If it was this easy to change his mind, why didn't anybody else change his mind earlier, you know? Everybody just has such different motives to even function as a team. Some people are like, yeah, let's just fight them, and other people are like, no, let's run away. Have you ever thought about having a conversation like a normal person instead of getting mad for no reason? And then so we find out that in order for them to do this weird hybrid model of fighting back against Eudoxus while also staying on the safe side, they need to build themselves an army. So Will is like, yeah, we need to go find all the other wanderers, or like even if they're normal humans, we need to arm them and like have them be part of our coalition. That sounds great and all, but like, I thought you were scared of humans finding out about your power. What happened to that? It's like everything is just so inconsistent. It's like so clear that I did not use a planning document. Chapter 10 starts with an announcement on the television screens that are in everybody's bedroom, and then so Zixrid looks up at his screen and it says, our plans towards Zimbabwe have been cancelled. Initiate Operation Gain Recruits. So Zixrid is like, oh yeah, that sounds cool and all, let's like build our own army, but I'm also freaking terrified because like if I get found by Eudoxus, they're gonna kill me on the spot. I feel like he's like low-key the only character that kind of has a brain because yeah, like obviously this doesn't benefit him, but eventually he just caves in because he's just such a big simp for Nova and he's willing to do whatever she says. And so find out that Zixrid is also building like a device that can be used to track magic in the world, which I definitely didn't steal from that one Equestria Girls movie. If one random person can make a magic seeking device on their own, then why has the entire country of Eudoxus not captured all the wanderers yet, you know? Obviously all these people are very powerful and smart. Why haven't they been able to capture these random 16-year-olds yet? Nova and Zixrid are just like having this cringe conversation. Nova is like, how's the tracker coming along? Zixrid was like, it's almost done. It's not perfect yet. And then she's like, nobody's perfect. And he's like, nobody's perfect, but I'm nobody, therefore I'm perfect. And then Nova is like, I gave up on talking some sense into you. You need more sense than I do. Are you insulting me? We are not friends until we get to the point where we start insulting each other. Zixrid is completely serious when he said this. And Eudoxus insults for nothing. And everything. This is like some Sarah J. Maas type writing. If you really believe that, you'd fit perfectly at my school, Nova said, then made a face as if remembering something terrible that had happened at her school. An alien can never fit in, he said. Don't call yourself that. Why not? Because alien would be an incorrect term. Freak is more accurate. Nova smiled, trying out the insulting method. I'm no more of a freak than you are. I know. Nova stood up and walked towards the doorway. I'm going to leave now. You need to get that tracker finished within the next 45 minutes. Then what? Then, she smiled, fake evilly. Prepare for your doom. Zixrid smirked. You're impossible. Not as impossible as you, she said as she walked down the hall, her footsteps getting fainter and fainter. Zixrid smiled to himself. Maybe this wasn't so awful after all. I think it's pretty awful. Like, girl, I think it's pretty awful. Don't you love all the comedic banter that they're having? Of course, like in any other amateurish YA sci-fi book, he was wrong. Chapter 11 starts out with all of them going to the garage that the fortress obviously has, and there are just like some fancy cars there, which obviously like Kai bought with his nepotism baby money. And then so they're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna take these cars to your house. And then he's like, yeah, I'm just rich like that. And then they're like, oh my god, he's just rich. And then so they take the cars and they're driving to Kai's house. In the car, Jasmine gets a call from her little sister. And her little sister's like, hey, where'd you go? You left us years ago and you still don't tell us where you are. And then Jasmine's like, yeah, I'm doing this for me. You just want to understand. And then her sister's like, what the frick is wrong with you? Jasmine is like, I'm sorry, but I just can't explain. Otherwise you'll think of me weirdly. And then they get all mad at each other. And it's like, how do you just not know where your sister goes? Jasmine literally just disappeared off the grid, and her sister like calls her regularly, presumably. And not once has Jasmine told her where she is. Not once has her sister called the police. This entire book is just a circus, and all the clowns are just these extremely convenient plot points that don't actually work together. They finally pull up to the house, and then she rings the doorbell, and then the chapter ends with her seeing a pool of blood gathering under her feet. Girl, I really do not want to film this stupid video. Whatever, I'll just finish filming this tomorrow. Anyway, bye bye fellas, I'll be back tomorrow, probably in a different outfit. Welcome back to another day of whatever this is. Bright red liquid gushed from the doorway, pooling under Jasmine's boots, soaking the soles. Jasmine drew back abruptly, staring at the doorway in shock. Nothing was there except for shadows and disco lights reflecting off the shiny floors of the foyer. What is this? Jasmine demanded, stumbling off the steps, her face frozen in shock. Then a stream of laughter echoed from the house. Nova frowned and stepped towards the entrance, daring to peek inside, but before she could take a look, someone emerged from the shadows and leaned against the door frame. So basically this is Kai's older brother who is throwing a party, because as we all know, rich people are constantly throwing parties. That's all they ever do. He's like, sorry about this like whole party situation. I totally didn't forget that you guys were coming over or anything. And turns out that the red was just like fruit punch that he decided to spill just for funsies, I guess. If that's not an A tier prank, then I don't know what that is. The brother's name is Zach, by the way, because of course it is. And he's like, there was a complication, so you won't get your submarine until tomorrow. But then the rest of the characters are like, oh yeah, we changed our plans, so we don't need that anymore. We're actually looking for a tour bus. Of course, we get this big description of what Kai and Zach's house looks like. If the house looked good on the outside, there were no words for it on the inside. The entire first floor was a huge indoor lake, a fountain dominating the ground. Marble tiles surrounded it, lined with sofas. The walls had doors on them, as I would expect a wall to have. Probably bedrooms and closets. 2 spiral escalators led to the second floor, which had more halls with doors. The ceiling was held up by pillars shaped like people holding up the roof, and the skylight above let the evening light shine through. Zach is like taking them to the party, and then they're like, wow, sure is a party. And then it turns out that Zach and Kai have a younger sister named Emma, who is a DJ, and she's DJing for the party. And then so she comes down to meet them. Emma is not like the other girls because she dresses really crazy, and unlike her brothers who are obsessed with themselves, she apparently tries to look ugly with her wacky fashion sense, which is definitely ugly because she's definitely not like a conventionally attractive girl or anything like that. And then so she's like, hey, who are you guys? And they're like, oh, we're just Kai's friends and we're trying not to die. Oh yeah, we need a tour bus, by the way, just so we can transport our new army to fight the Eudoxians for whatever reason, even though we're running away from them a second ago. For some reason, none of these people are like fazed by any of this. Emma and Zach are just like, yeah, my brother's like kind of a weirdo, like just get over it, middle child things. Zach is like, yeah, you guys should stay for the party for literally no reason. So the rest of the characters are like, okay, fine, I guess I'll stay for the party. But then before they can stay for the party, everything is disrupted by a monster attack. Who would have guessed? Actually, I wouldn't have guessed this. Like, if anything, I would have expected like the Eudoxians to attack again, but apparently there are monsters in this series too, so. Although the chandeliers lit up the entire hallway, that certain room seemed dark. Nova detached herself from the group and carefully walked towards the door. She pricked up her hearing, drowning out the noise of the party. She heard the faint scratching of metal against metal as if someone were sharpening a knife. Her fingers crept towards the sheathed blade concealed in her coat pocket. She held her breath, leaning closer and closer, just a little closer. Before she could draw back, the door flung open, darkness flooding the hallway. Nova drew her blade in one quick movement, gripping the hilt so hard her knuckles turned white. She turned to the open door to face. What was it? The thing in front of her seemed to be made completely out of shadows. It was a hideous scaly thing with a head shaped like an ant and the body shaped like a hunchback with 3 long fingers extending from each wispy arm and a long scorpion-like tail whipping out randomly. The entire creature was made out of black fog, spinning and twirling like a tornado. This monster is like chasing them around, trying to kill them. They have this epic sword fight, which is literally just like, hey-ya, with their knives, and the monster being like, Of course, Will swoopes in to save the day. He slays the monster. Everything is all okay. And in chapter 13, Nova goes on a spiel about how she has never been invited to parties and she never saw herself as a party gal. Emma is like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll make you more like the other girls. So she takes her to her bedroom and then she gives her a bunch of outfits to try on. And Nova is like, oh, but I can't wear that. It's too, like, scandalous.
Is this say yes to the dress or say yes to the slut?
And Emma's like, it's just the party, just wear it, girl. Emma's like, oh yeah, by the way, I know that you're into Will, so if you want him to pay attention to you, then you should probably wear this dress, which is peak feminism. And so she puts on the dress, and then she goes to the party, and then she sees Zixfrid there, who's also kind of dressed up, and then he's like, oh my gosh, you look really weird. And then Jasmine and Zach are kind of together now, straight off the bat, which we love the pacing of this book, don't we? Zixfrid and Nova start talking at the party, and then Zixfrid is like, back at my home, we never had fun. And then she's like, oh my god, what? What do you mean you never had fun? And he's like, well, because my country, Eudoxus, is so strict and rigid and it's all about following the leader. Zixfrid is like, yeah, and like no one wanted to have fun because they were scared the queen was going to kill them. Nova's like, yeah, like I wouldn't want to lose you either. And then he's like, okay. Well, of course, she also sees Will at the party and she's like, oh my god, he looks so cool. I just want him to suck my toes. Not actually, like she doesn't say that, but you know what I'm saying. Zixfrid is like, hey guys, sorry to interrupt your little romantic moment, in that exact tone. I can sense there's wanderer magic around here. And so the three of them are like, oh my god, what? And Zixfrid is like, no, but we have to go check it out together. And by the way, I don't want you to hang out with Will because I have a bad feeling about him. Nova's like, what do you mean? And then Zixfrid is like, oh, he just feels kind of not human, you know what I'm saying? I feel like there's something kind of evil about him. Obviously she's really pissed off and she's like, where are you getting your evidence from? And then Zixfrid is like, I made it up. Nova, don't be blinded by his looks. He only has unearthly beauty because he's not from Earth. Oh, and you're just saying that because you're jealous of him. She heard her voice rise, but she didn't care. He's dangerous. One day he's gonna end up killing you or you're gonna end up killing him. It's impossible. Why can't you just be thankful? Because he's not. Why do you even care about me? Why would I not? Nova froze. She stared at Zixfrid, surprised at his sudden change of words. Someone finally doesn't hate me. Because, Nova said, I'm just some random girl you rescued, remember? I haven't even known you for 3 days yet. It's not part of the deal to keep me alive. Okay, and then that's the end of chapter 13, which was extremely riveting, I know. And then in chapter 13, we're in Will's point of view, and then he's like vibing, but then he suddenly feels really weird, and then he looks down at a cut on his arm from the demons that attacked a couple of chapters ago, and then his blood is blue, which apparently is the color of the Eudoxian's blood. And he's like, oh my god, what the heck? Takes Nova outside to talk to her about it, and she's like, oh my god, are you a Eudoxian? And he's like, no, this has happened before, but I'm definitely not. For some reason, Will decides to take this opportunity to open up to her. He explains to her the truth behind all of the dark memories that she saw. Will sighed and turned so that he faced away from her. It was another minute before he spoke. When I was younger, there was a girl. She was the Viagram and she was one of our latest recruits. She died a year before you came to us and was killed by Eudoxus. She's the girl you saw in my memories. The blonde girl, Winter Evelyn. Of course it's felt like that, Jesus Christ. I loved her, she loved me. We knew it, even without words. And then Eudoxus attacked and she was gone. Nova didn't know what to say. Why was he telling her about his past? Why her? What did this have to do with anything? That's a damn good question, isn't it? Her mouth felt dry, her heart beating a million times a second, her palms clammy as she knitted her fingers together in nervousness. She felt like thousands of people watching her. And then she taps into his mind again and finishes his sentence for him, or his paragraph, because these people cannot shut up. She finally found her voice and said, "You're still not over her. Even after she died, you remember everything about her. She was ambitious and powerful and romantic and beautiful, and she saw everything that was good in you, especially when no one else did. When you found out she died, you didn't talk for a year. All you did was think about her, and you blamed yourself for her death. If you'd done your job correctly instead of ordering everyone around, she would have still been alive." Nova didn't realize she was using her power until she spoke the last sentence. More questions appeared in her mind, but she pushed them down. After her death, you tried everything to bring her back, which included experimenting with chronogram powers. When that failed, you made an oath never to love again if things are going to turn out this way. Bro is 16 and already going through his midlife crisis. You think you're failing everyone and making everyone's life miserable. If only you'd done a better job in the past, everything would have been fine, Nova said, as if reading from a script. That's right, Will answered finally. He spoke with such clarity and confidence, like discussing these things with a random girl is perfectly normal. I want to do better, Nova. Nova. This is why I need you. This is also why I can't have affairs with Eudoxus, especially not the queen. It was Rain who killed Winter. She vowed to come after me the next time she saw me personally. The way these people all have like warrior cat names is so funny to me. Nova felt her arms shake with anger, with protectiveness. Even though Will was maybe 1,000 times better at just about everything than she was, she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to be by him at all the time. Why are they doing this at all? What's their point? Nova expected herself to burst into tears, but she was too mad to even think about crying. They already have magic, much more than Earth. Why do they need more? Will's eyes flashed with anger for a moment, but it wasn't directed at Nova. Power is like money. You just can't have enough of it, and once you start running out, you get desperate. So deep. That's not an excuse for Eudoxus's actions. What's their problem, and why do we need to face off against them? Why not the military or whatever? Because they're powerless. Magic is 1,000,000 times more powerful than any human-made weapon. A Lenoxium dagger can kill more people than a military tank. I don't really know how that works. Don't military tanks fire like stuff, bullets or whatever at a bunch of people and can like literally run people over? The math ain't mathin', but I guess that's just the logic of this book, which means that there is no logic. And then so Nova's like, yeah dude, I don't think you're weird at all. I totally trust you with everything. He's got her wrapped around his finger. He could literally ask her to like jump off a cliff and she would probably do it. A very healthy relationship slash friendship slash coworker dynamic, as we can see here. And then so Will is like, if you trust me, then will you come with me to check out the disturbance upstairs? They go out onto the roof porch thing, and then there's a woman standing there, but then she's wearing sneaky spy outfit. And of course I described what she looks like in great excessive detail. She was beautiful but dangerous looking, like a tiger, with large gray eyes and dark red hair the color of blood. Her lips were bright red and she wore a whole lot of eyeliner. Jasmine would have approved. Her face was a darkish color, like she lived at the beach. Her cheekbones were very angular, like a model, but he couldn't let her looks deceive him. She was a source of bad magic. "Who's there?" she demanded and brought up a taser. The end crackled with blue energy. "You're from Eudoxus," Will said, not lowering his weapon. "Who are you?" "No, I'm not." She stepped closer, and Will stepped backwards. He reached towards Nova in case they needed to vanish. "You're not Eudoxian?" Nova spoke up. "Then what are you?" "My name is Ashen." Ashen? Again with the warrior cat names. I don't know what's going on here, I'm sorry. "My name is Ashen Lee, leader of League Gold of Manhattan, consisting of people with powers. You won't believe me, but..." "People with powers? What kind of powers?" Will took on a skeptical tone. "I categorize them by 3 names. The mind, the movement, and the time," Ashton responded, folding away her taser. She gazed at the two of them, frowning critically. This couldn't be a coincidence. So she's like, "Yeah, by the way, I have this whole group of 15 people with powers, and I was wondering if you want to join us." So Will is like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what I wanted." Him and Nova, like neither of them really see any issue with this. They don't think it's too good to be true or anything. Just as they're about to close their deal, Ashen signals to her co-workers who have just been hiding around the porch, and she's like, "Wait, what?" Nova demanded, as large nets sprang out from the walls, falling over the two of them. Ashen's painted lips twisted into a sneer. "Did you really think we'd let you control us? I can't believe you fell for it. We're not wanderers at all." Her form flickered for a second, her skin turning white, her eyes and hair dark black. She was Eudoxian after all. But who? The Eudoxian named Charlie, which is a goofy-ass name for someone who's part of a military country, drew a long tranquilizer gun. She smiled oh, so Charlie's a girl, okay. She smiled evilly and raised it. "I am Ashen, second variation of Queen Rain, future leader of Eudoxus, and I need both of you." The trigger was pulled. Nova fell unconscious, a dart in her back. "Give up now or I'll take both of you." He couldn't speak. He didn't know what he was feeling, but it was close to fear. Charlie pointed the tranquilizer at him and refilled the chamber, and everything went dark. Bum bum bum! And then we cut back to Jasmine's POV. Jasmine is still at the party, and then she has a weird vibe. And then so she's like, something is wrong. Will and Nova need help. For some reason, Jasmine also has the ability to sense the approximate location of other wanderers, which is like, if these people have these powers, then why haven't they been able to find other wanderers? Jasmine is like, I think somebody kidnapped Will and Nova, and they're taking them to Upper West Side or whatever. Upper East Side. I've never lived in New York. Jasmine and Zach are like, yeah, we should go rescue them. And so the two of them plus Kai and Zigzard are like, okay, we're gonna go on this rescue mission to get them back. And that's the end of chapter 14. Chapter 15, we are now at 200 pages. 200 pages of absolute nonsense and bad pacing. It was strange how brave you can be when the girl you liked was in danger. One minute, Siegfried was in the party room, holding up his device looking for other wanderers. The next, he was in a helicopter with Jasmine, Kai, and Zach, soaring straight towards a multi-story abandoned building in what was known as Harlem, Manhattan. Couldn't we just have taken a car? Siegfried asked. He saw no reason for a fancy chopper like this one. That's a normal people way of transportation. We're not normal people, Zach responded, as if being abnormal was the best thing in the universe. Siegfried resisted the urge to say, yes, I have noticed. He wasn't exactly ordinary himself. The helicopter lands on top of a big building where Jasmine thinks that they are. We cut again to Nova's POV. She discovers that she and Will are in the back of a truck, but it's like an ambulance type of truck. Driver's seat is like separate from the back of the truck. The two of them are like, oh my god, the heck, we have to get out of here. Suddenly, the television in front of them flickers on, and then there's Ashen's face in it, and she's like FaceTiming them like, ha ha ha, I've got you guys. And they're like, what do you want from us? And then she's like, you know what I want you to submit so that the queen can kill you and take you for your powers. And so they're like, no. Ashen is like, I'm not that bad, am I? I'm just a teenager like you two are. Only you're insane, Nova put in. Ashen laughed. Who knows? You might be the insane one, Nova. Who is truly evil, me or you? The screen changed to static the way it did in the movies. Ashen certainly had a thing for dramatic exits. Still, the words were knives that cut deep scars into Nova's brain. I don't know, I think I tried to do like a really quirky thing where I do the whole, what does evil mean? There are two sides to evil, blah blah blah. But it just doesn't work in the context of this book because we're led to believe that the Wanderers are good no matter what. All we see is just them having crazy powers and fighting demons and never losing any battles. How are we supposed to prescribe to this theme of good versus evil being a very nuanced thing when it's not nuanced in the book at all? Anyway, that's the end of chapter whatever that was. And now we are at part 2. Enemies within. And then of course we have another quote here. You have to learn to be our best friends because we fall too easily into the trap of being our own worst enemies. So now we're back to Siegfried, Jasmine, Kai, and Zach, and they're like trying to figure out where to go to find their friends now. Siegfried is like, oh my gosh, I'm having a vision, which is so out of nowhere. This man has something to do with the Wanderers, so why is he suddenly knowing where they are, you know what I'm saying? And he's like, oh, I think they're like somewhere in Vermont maybe, like I'm not really sure, but I think they're in Vermont. Vermont is like a state, it's not like a singular location, but for some reason the rest of them are like, that's brilliant, we have to go to Vermont. And then so they decide to get into a race car and drive there. Cut back to Nova and Will's POV, and they're in the back of the truck and they're trying to figure out a way to get out of there. And so they unscrew the door and then they jump out of the car while it's moving, and then they run towards the forest. Of course, the guy driving the car notices, and then he stops the car, and then he summons all the other Eudoxians to go chasing after them in the woods. So now they're like running through the woods, trying to catch up to them. And then we also find out that Will and Nova can run really fast, and that's part of like the Wanderer power pack. These people are so clearly overpowered, and they have no personality to back it up. So now they're hiding in some bushes, and then they're climbing trees to escape them. At the end of the chapter, Ashen kidnaps Nova, and then decides to hold her hostage so that Will have to give himself in order to free her. If you're only going to get one out of two of them, then why not just like take her and like not hold her hostage, you know? Like, why not just skip that whole ordeal? Chapter 17, Will is still in the forest. He's like running away from the other guards that are still shooting at him, and then he climbs up a tree, and then they shoot him, and then they low-key knock him out, and then he falls off the tree, and then we get some random flashback to his memories, which I was actually looking forward to because like I could not name a single personality trait about this man despite reading over 200 pages of description about how amazing his dark hair and blue eyes are. Like 6 years ago when he was like 10 or 11, whatever, he lived a pretty normal life with his parents, but then one day these people came in and killed his parents, and these people turned out to be Eudoxians, big surprise. And then so he decided to run away, and then he ran away, and then he found Jasmine and Kai, and the three of them decided to live together. And I don't really know how Jasmine and Kai got onto the streets either, but for some reason they all did. I don't know how the rich son of billionaires who has helicopters and stuff just like stumbles into this situation, especially when they're a child. But again, nothing makes sense. We are in hell. I also forgot to mention that while the people were killing his parents, Will decided to kill them. He basically became a murderer at the ripe old age of like 10. So that's wonderful, that's lovely. And then Will wakes up again in the back of the same exact van, and then Ashen is FaceTiming him, and then he's like, what have you done with Nova? Where is she? And then Ashen is like, ha ha ha, I'm holding her hostage. And then so he's like, I won't let this happen. Now we're back to Nova's POV, and she's in a jail cell within office that the Eudoxians have like underground in some random cliff in Vermont. So they bring Will in, and then suddenly they decide to change their course of action because the Eudoxians lock both of them in the same cage. And then we cut back to the four of them, Jasmine, Siegfried, Kai, and Zach, who have somehow located the office in Vermont where Will and Nova are being held. And so the four of them are like running around the fortress trying to find where Nova and Will are being locked up. They're like fighting all the Eudoxians with their powers. We actually do see Jasmine and Kai's power, I think, like for the first time when like a Eudoxian tries to attack them, but before they can like hit them, they like reverse time and then kick them in the face. Finally find the room where they're being held, and they're like, okay, we need to break in and break these people out. And then now that brings us to chapter 18, where Tori, the girl who's guarding the cage, are like, oh yeah guys, there are visitors, you guys better stay in here while we go see who they are. And then Nova for some reason decides to link her brain to Siegfried's to find out where he is and how he's gonna break them out. And it's like, you couldn't have done this before. If you had this power to link your brain to like telepathically communicate with someone else this entire time, couldn't you just have used that from the start instead of like leading these people on a wild goose chase? At that moment, Will and Nova decide to break out. They have like a secret knife that they've hidden in their pocket, and then they pull out the little knife and then they undo the lock on the chains and like their handcuffs and stuff, and then they bust out and then they run around the facility like trying to get away, and the Eudoxians are following after them. And then she and Will finally run into the other four characters and they all get into their car and then they drive away. I am tired, so I will go and you will see the conclusion of this video when I film tomorrow. Toodaloo! So I'm just going to be finishing up the rest of the book today. I think we have like 80 pages left. And also one thing I found out is that I actually never wrote like the final few chapters of this book, so for that part I'll just be summarizing what I wrote in my planning document, which I apparently had this whole time. Okay, so in chapter 19, remember they've just escaped the fortress where they were being held, and now they're about to drive away to whatever part of the earth they decide to desecrate with their cringe dialogue next. So now they decide that they need to go hide out somewhere new so that the Eudoxians can't find them, which completely contradicts the whole point of what they've been doing so far, which I thought was to fight back and build an army. Suddenly they're back to like hiding from them. I'm glad I never decided to do anything with this book. If I had published this when I was 12, I looked back at it now, I would not have been able to live with myself knowing that other people have read this. I guess by sharing this with you guys, it means other people have technically read it, but I'll try not to think about that. So now Jasmine is saying, I just had a realization. We need to find a place far away from here, but not so far that we get lost. It needs to be hidden and not suspicious at all. Think about it. What's the one place nobody's going to look for a group of teenagers in? Kai said, a library? That's just you. Right now we're going to Old Main Candle Factory, abandoned since the 19-somethings. How is that any better than a library? Kai asked, doubtful of Jasmine as ever. Because, she said, it's my old hideout from my childhood. She saw everyone's facial expressions and added, just trust me this once, okay? Apparently that is like the one place that teenagers never go to, and she's right. Personally, as a teenager, I have never been to a candle factory, especially not one that has been abandoned for hundreds of years. That's an A+ for factual accuracy. They decide to go to the candle factory, which we later find out was apparently where Jasmine used to hide out, like with a couple of friends back when she like ran away from home. For some reason we still don't understand. And then they enter the candle factory, they sort of sort themselves around. They're like, oh, like there are rooms that you can take, which like, if this place has been abandoned for many years, then like why are the rooms still intact? And why haven't the authorities come to demolish this place? Like, I don't know. This book is just beyond logic. Like it's transcended the physical realm. We get a little bit of Jasmine's backstory at this point, which seems appropriate. This is a house I used to live in. See, I ran away from home when I was 8. I found myself in a group of friends that wanted to take me in because they said I had a lot of spunk or something. It's more like a gang, really. I lived with them until I was 11, until the police found me and brought me to my family. 2 years later, I found out I was a traveler. She leaned against the walls, her lips curling into an actual smile like she was recalling good memories. Emma's disapproving expression turned into an admiring one. You were in a gang? That explains so much, Kai said. The thing you need to know about Kai is that throughout this whole book, his entire personality has just been making fun of Jasmine, and her whole personality has been fighting against that because that's what feminism is all about. I can't believe that at the age of 12, I invented feminism. Now they're trying to assign bedrooms to each person, and for some reason, Emma is like the one doing this. Like, remember, she's the little sister, and she's like, this place is clearly divided into 3 sections. This is the main lobby where they ship their products into other places. The empty garages are out back. The second and upstairs section is for making the products themselves. It's obviously full of machines and other random stuff. The third and upper levels are for lounges and rooms. Isn't that where you stayed back then? Jasmine nodded, surprised at Emma's commanding voice. Now I want you all to distribute yourselves evenly into the rooms. Don't fight or else I'm gonna kill you. I don't want to clean that up. Any questions? I can imagine her as a Disney Channel character. The only like type of media I consumed at this age, other than like badly written young adult dystopian novels, was Disney Channel shows. So I think like that combination really made for a tragedy such as this book. It's like when you combine fire and gasoline, this is what happened. Everybody is like, wait a second, why are you in charge of us? We're not gonna listen to a 13-year-old. Everybody turns to Will because obviously he's so cool and so powerful and so all-knowing, even though he's literally like 3 years older than her. And then he's like, actually I agree with Emma on this one, you should listen to her. And then everybody's like, what the heck is going on? And this is like such a random uncalled for conflict. Leadership can be attributed to multiple people, and I don't think I realized this at the time. Everything is just so unwarranted in this situation. Like, why is this even a conflict? And of course Nova is all pissed off about this. She literally doesn't care about anyone unless it's her man. And so she's like, if you keep letting Emma make decisions, we're going to have a really big problem. I trust her, Will said. Nova's eyebrows went up and her facial expression froze. She's 13. Age doesn't matter. I found this group when I was 12. That's only because you're like a Supreme Commander super magic child prodigy person thing, Will sighed internally. This was the problem. Everyone he ran into expected him to have a solution to everything. It was a lot easier with only a few people to lead, but a few years ago it had been worse. This wasn't something he could achieve on his own. But he didn't like people and people didn't like him, except for Nova. But she was powerful and he didn't want to take advantage of powerful people on a whim. I just don't understand what this man's goal is. Like, if you ask me one thing that he wants to achieve other than not wanting to get captured, like, I could not name it to you. On one hand, he's like, I hate being a leader, but I also like being a leader, but no one likes me except this random girl likes me, and she's powerful, so now I don't feel bad for like taking advantage of her. And then they start having this conversation about how wanderers like disappear, like why there used to be so many and why there's so little now. And then he's like, oh, obviously a lot of them died. And she's like, yeah, obviously, but were there any that decided to leave? Only way like a wanderer can stop being a wanderer is one, if they die, which is obvious, and two is if they drop out. Nova's like, but what if someone wanted to die, you know, like toaster oven, like sewer slide? And then he's like, oh, that's not cool, but if you wanted to, you have free will. And then Nova's like, okay. And then that's just where the conversation ends, and it's really freaking weird. And then after Nova leaves, Will has this complex internal monologue where he's like, why did Nova have to ask such difficult questions? He wasn't a robot. He wasn't a computer program that could simply spit out a logical answer. If only things were that easy. He wasn't even sure he had a life inside of him anymore. Why was Nova doing this, asking questions like the fate of the world rested upon him? Maybe Will was being selfish again, but he knew it was for a good reason. Everything was for a good reason, right? He couldn't possibly be the enemy. And then it struck him the way someone would strike a ball out of a field. The idea, much like the ball, was far-fetched, but unlike the ball, it wasn't as simple. This is the craziest metaphor I've ever read. But what if they were actually fighting against themselves? He heard Ashen's words in the back of his mind again. Who is truly evil, me or you? What if they were the enemy? This is so unwarranted again. What path of logic leads us to this conclusion? It goes from him complaining about Nova asking a difficult question about sewer slide to him being like, oh, this makes me selfish. Like, why? We never figure out why. And then this leads him to believe that he's the enemy, but we never figure out who he's the enemy to or why that would even be a thing. I think I was just trying really hard to make this as angsty and fake deep as possible. Okay, we're finally at chapter 20. We get even more of Jasmine's backstory. Apparently when she first joined this gang, everyone else was like an adult and she was just like child, which is really sus. But apparently she had been like special. She wasn't like the other 8-year-old kids, okay? It was because she was a wanderer, but she didn't know that yet. But that was why she was so strong. She was so like powerful. She could see really far. She could lift heavy things. And that was why the gang guys had like taken her in. And then we get this like specific flashback to a time when she was 11 and she was in this car with guys that was like hanging out with her. And then there was a snowstorm and then they get snowed into their car so they can't drive any further. And then so they get out of the car and then they run as fast as they can towards a random house in the distance, which is always a great idea. You should definitely start running in an extreme snowstorm. Not that I would know anything because I'm Californian, but you get what I'm saying. When she and the other old dude were hiding out in the house, they had this deep conversation about Jasmine's family, who we actually find out were very neglectful, which is why she ran away. Her friend is like, oh yeah, but like you'll always belong here, you'll always have a spot with us. And she's like, oh my gosh, that was the first time I've ever felt loved. And then now we cut back to Jasmine lying in bed, and then we find out that she's been having these thoughts while lying there. She hears these weird sounds coming from outside, so she gets up out of her bed, and then she walks down the hallway, and then she finds Kai there. "What are you doing here?" Jasmine hissed, pinning him down to the floor. Her knife scattered across the floor, but she didn't care. She was too confident in her fighting abilities. "What are you doing up at 3 a.m.? Kai's eyes narrowed, but he didn't fight against her grip. Says the person who's also up at 3 a.m. He had a point there. A stack of metallic objects laid a few feet away, and it was filled with weapons. "Why do you have all these weapons? Explain yourself." "Hold on, Jasmine, one at a time." Which is crazy because she's literally only asking one question. "We have no time. Hurry up and explain before I have to resort to physical action." Of course, Kai is like real patronizing, and he's like, "Oh, but you're weak. You're just a skinny little kid. You can't do anything against me." And then, of course, she has to kick in with her girl boss moment by trying to punch him. The two of them are sword fighting for some reason. And then they get interrupted by the other characters coming out of their rooms and being like, "What the heck is going on?" Kai was actually trying to sneak out of the fortress to go back to his house because apparently his family was running out of money and he had to get back to working as an actor to make sure they could keep up with their luxury lifestyle. These people are so rich, like I don't think you can go from point A to B like overnight. Second, like he's literally a kid, but then the rest of them get really mad at him being like, "Oh, you're trying to betray us, you don't care about the team at all." And then that's where the chapter like abruptly ends. Like we get literally no conflict resolution. We don't know what happened. And then in the next chapter we basically just see like a montage of what happens as they live inside the candle factory. Nova is training again. She's trying to learn how to fight and stuff, even though like we've already established that she's extremely overpowered. She still somehow needs to be able to fire arrows and stuff, even though she has literally the ability to control people's minds. Kai actually decided to compromise, so he's like rotating between being with the Wanderers and being at his house, which makes a lot of sense. I don't know why they made such a big deal out of it before. One day they decide to sit together and talk about what exactly is going to happen next. Eudoxus doesn't usually take this long to attack, Siegfried said at an impromptu meeting on Thursday. They had found a small room that might have been used as a storage room and had made it their unofficial lounge. Then what's holding them back? Jasmine asked, the question she'd been wanting to get out there for weeks. I don't know, Siegfried said. These 3 words drove everyone crazy. It even showed in their faces. Not knowing was the true fear. Secrets were truths that ached to be known. Someone put that in a Tumblr post. But what I do know, Siegfried said quickly, before anyone could come at him, is that Rain is most likely building up an army stronger than before. She knows you're more powerful than other Wanderers in the past. She knows there's something a bit off about you, and I feel it too. A Wanderer radar is kind of built into a Eudoxian mind, and I can sense something different. Something that I've never felt before. This is talking about Nova, by the way, of course, because she's a pick-me, overpowered main character. Are you sure? Nova put in, flipping through some old magazines that were lying around in the storage room. She tossed one aside and gave Siegfried her entire focus. I don't think so. It's something deeper than just building an army. They're going to surprise us, I know it. Is they going to sneak up on us with androids or something? Jasmine asked, skeptical. Would Eudoxus become that desperate for us? No, Will put in, eyeing Jasmine in a way that made her feel like she was shrinking. They don't want us, they want our magic. He stood up and took the center of the room, zapping all attention away from Siegfried onto him. Siegfried looked a little irritated, but he stayed silent. Think about it, Will continued. They're not interested in our physical selves, not even our mental selves. What they want from us is magic. Nothing else matters to them except that. And once they have what they need, they're going to kill all of us, just to keep us from telling the rest of the world. Possibly you too, Siegfried. We know that your magical abilities surpass any Eudoxians by far. Like, in what way? We have not seen that happen once. Considering the fact that you're also a traitor, this man really just says it like it is. They kill you in the slowest, most painful way possible. Eudoxus and Wanderers have a special connection. The connection is what they're using to track us. And yes, I agree that they're looking to take our abilities, but that's not the only thing they're after. They also want our humanity, our knowledge, our memories. Using them, Rain wants to turn Eudoxus into a more colonized and organized country before wiping out all humans and claiming Earth as their own. Siegfried spoke confidently, like he'd been reading a textbook. Will gave him a look. Where's your proof? Siegfried froze for half a second before continuing. Eudoxus and planet Earth have no connection whatsoever. They don't support one another. Wait, but didn't you just say that they have a special connection? Even if humans were to fall, Eudoxus would stay alive. Earth is almost 100 times better in environment and resources than Eudoxus. If you were a Eudoxian leader, wouldn't you want to take it over? Will still didn't take his sharp gaze away from him. Nova felt the air intensifying around them. What are you trying to say? Siegfried paused for a few seconds, thinking. Finally he said, without personality, without knowledge, without who we are, people are nothing. People are nothing without humanity. Which is crazy coming from him, because isn't he also a Eudoxian? They let this sink in. The words seemed to leave marks on Nova's skin. People are nothing without humanity. Did Nova even have any humanity left in her? For the past few weeks, all she had been doing was running, fighting, and arguing. What part of that was human? All she wanted right now, more than ever, was to go home and forget about all this. She didn't want Eudoxus on her trail. She didn't want to take control of anything. All she wanted was to forget this. How are you going to extract someone's humanity? I get if you're trying to take someone's magic out of them, that's a tangible thing you can do, maybe. Humanity? What does that mean? Are you just gonna steal their brain? So that arc of the story ends there. No conflict resolution. One day, Sigrid has this crazy idea to amplify Nova's abilities so that she can become a one-person army herself. She's initially like, no, what if something goes wrong? What if I die? And then he's like, well, that's a possibility, but we should still try it anyway. And then eventually he pressures her into doing it, which we love. We love when people are pressured into doing things that they don't want to do on their own. And so now she's in the device and her powers are being amplified. And of course, I have to describe it for like multiple pages. Nova could feel every electron multiplied by infinity as the charges slipped through her bones, muscles, skin, everything. It was like being strung onto a piece of string and dangled from a high place, tiny needles piercing in her flesh. This wasn't hurt, this wasn't pain. This was heartbreak turned physical, freezing cold and burning hot at the same time. I want to speed up the reading of this long ad description, just so that you can see how unnecessary all of it is. Sharp pain lands through her head and colorful spots flash in front of her eyes. She starts going on this power trip. Once her power is activated, she's like, oh, it's finally time for me to like unleash this power upon everyone who's wronged me. But then she gets ripped out of her tranced state before she can actually do any damage. And everyone's like, what the heck is going on? And the Sigrid is like, haha, yeah, sorry, I was trying to experiment with her powers. And then everybody's like, you know, that's extremely dangerous, right? Like, people could literally die. And then he's like, haha, whoopsie. But then Nova's power is so powerful now, like she's even more overpowered than before. She's just standing there and then suddenly like, she kind of lets go of her power and then she's transported somewhere else. We don't really know what happens, but you just have to know that she's accidentally transported somewhere else. Chapter 22. And we see that here she has traveled into Kai's mind, which was the place that she was going in the previous chapter. Power has been amplified so much to the point where she not only recalls things that happened to him, but she can also visualize herself in his body as a child. So now she's walking around in the mansion, and then she's being called by her family to this family meeting, and then at the family meeting they're talking about how they have to be super rich. His parents are like overworking the kids as child actors so that they can all be really rich, which like, yeah, I agree, that's pretty messed up. And then she's like, ruh-roh, and then she comes back to reality, and then it turns out that everybody was actually placed into another person's mind. So like she was in Kai's mind, but then someone else was in someone else's mind, and so on and so forth, which would have been interesting if it wasn't so random and out of nowhere. Yeah, and then that's where the chapter ends. Like, we get no explanation of what other people saw, we don't get any explanation of who was in whose mind, none of that. We don't get people thinking of what to do with this new innovation. They don't plan to like use it to their advantage. It's just kind of like, oh, I guess she has powers now. Time to continue hiding from Eudoxus and making grand Tumblr-esque statements about humanity. And then of course, these people change their plan again to the whole let's fight them and face them head on sort of thing. And then so Will is like, we're not going to hide anymore, we'll go and confront Eudoxus itself. There's not much we can do now. Do you want to face them once and live the rest of our lives in peace? Or do you want to spend your lifetime running from this force that nobody else believes in? Of course the answer was obvious. Now that they all had colossal powers, fighting back was the obvious choice. But how long would they last? Not even the most powerful person could withstand a technologically advanced army. There was always force, trickery, and blackmail that can make someone give in as easily as they had started. At the moment, neither sounded like good options. We need to infiltrate and destroy their base, Sigrid said. All eyes turned on to him. The base is where they're creating monsters and weapons to try and capture us. Once the base is gone, they'll have nothing to fight us with. Only their mortal strength and minimal magic. We could easily defeat them from there. But are we going to kill them? Kai put in, or are we going to let them live? They let us live, right? Nova said after a silence. Killing them wouldn't be any good. Remember how they can turn into dust? That means they've got a lot of lives. Without the base, their regenerating powers would be gone, Jasmine said. The base provides everything for them, right? No base, no magic. They can't fight back and we win. Simple. It's not that simple, Will said. You have to remember that there are thousands of them. Some are actually as powerful as Siegfried. Imagine all of them against the 4 of us. It'll be like a high school dropout arguing with a team of politicians about America's socio-economic ethics. I don't think politicians would know anything about that either, but I didn't say that. We can't do this. We can't put ourselves at risk. Jasmine sighed loudly. Hey. She put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. We have been at risk for the past 4 years. I don't think this will make a change. And like Siegfried said, we can either run forever or fight back. What decision do you think is better? And so they decide to actually go up to Eudoxus and fight them in their own turf. They actually decide to destroy the base, kill the queen, hope that that wipes out everybody else. And that brings us to the final part, part 3, Storm of Broken Wings. And then we have a quote from a Taylor Swift song. In typical 2016 fashion, they finally convene and decide to take a plane up to Eudoxus to attack them. And apparently Kai has grabbed one of the planes from his family, which is so confusing because if like you can see Eudoxus from like a plane elevation, then why haven't people seen it yet? That's where I stopped writing. So for the rest of the story arc that I haven't written yet, I am going to give you a summary using my planning document. Okay, so their plan now is that Kai is going to head into the Eudoxian lab where the queen and her soldiers are, and he's going to like act all scared and let her trap him. And so while he's doing that, Will and Jasmine will teleport in and steal the queen's computer microchip. Siegfried will hack the computer microchip and process all the information, and then download video files of her saying really suspicious stuff with other politicians regarding the well-being of other Eudoxians. And then so now Nova's going to mind control a soldier into opening the cell that Kai is going to be trapped in, and then they're all going to escape. And the next day they decide to hijack the main big screen that's going to be at the town square when they're having the We Captured the Wanderers festival in a few days. So like at night he programs that to go up during that time. And then they stay in hiding for a few days, and then Will decides one night to sneak out and kind of deviate and do his own part of the plan, which is to kill the queen, the way that the queen killed that one other girl that we found out about in his memories. As he's about to kill her, her illusion melts off, and it turns out that she was actually the girl Winter in his memory this whole time. Queen Rain was actually Winter this entire time. And then he's going to be really devastated and stuff, you know, all that cool jazzy stuff. And then in the morning, the citizens finally see the video clips of the queen being a meanie, and then they're going to go on this witch hunt for the queen and be like, bring her to us, we don't want to be under her rule anymore, blah blah blah. The whole situation with Winter secretly being the queen. Winter, after she had been kidnapped by Eudoxus, her original intention was to sneak back on to Earth after killing the queen herself, and then she killed her, but then there was a spell within the queen that made sure that whoever killed her also became her. One of the guards kills Will after he sees him killing the queen, so now both of them are dead. Thank God that guy was so freaking annoying. Of course, there are some blinded soldiers who still don't believe that the queen is evil after seeing all those clips, and they're like trying to defend the queen even though she's literally dead. They're still trying to defend her name, while other people are being like, oh, she's evil, and then they find out that the queen is dead, and now everybody's like, oh no, what the frick, my life just went down the drain in like 0.2 seconds. Soldiers who are still loyal to the queen set off the emergency bombs, causing the entire country to explode, which is stupid. That's like throwing away your whole toilet just because someone took a fat poop in it. And then at this point, only Jasmine and Kai have descended back onto Earth because they left early for some unknown reason. Nova and Siegfried are still stuck on Eudoxus as it burns, and that was the end of the first book. Apparently there was supposed to be a second book and a third book, and then the second book was supposed to start with Nova and Siegfried being stuck on Eudoxus and how they managed to escape from there, while the characters that are on Earth try to reconcile with their personal issues. We also see the resurgence of Eudoxians that escaped the planet, and all that was supposed to play out. I never read the second book for a good reason, so that's where that ends. That was the entire book. That was the book. God. This has taken like 3 days to film, and each day I've been filming for like an hour, so I don't know how long this video is gonna end up being. If you made it this far, please drop a like and a subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be doing a lot of videos like this, whether it does well or not, just because I have so many books I've written as a child and so many like questionable pieces of media I've made. I just want to dive into all of that and expose my cringy past on YouTube for funsies. Tee. So yeah, thank you guys again for watching. Please subscribe. I am like dying. Please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Doodles!